ways, and as they talked about their own experience with racial inequities and the criminal justice system and mass incarceration. So we're here to hear today from Stephen to learn about the coalition that he is a part of. Stephen Johnson Grove, who's on my screen on the left, and if you're doing Hollywood Squares, you could make like a whole X's in the second row, but I don't know where he is on yours. But it says Stephen, and Stephen's actually in Cincinnati with those of us who are in Cincinnati, and has really works with a broad coalition of people who have been really mindful of this issue of mass incarceration and the power that it's had over our state. And recently this coalition has was able to get the state legislature to pass the Ban the Box initiative. So state employees no longer have to check a box saying that if on their first application to be a state employee, no longer have to check a box saying they've been arrested or imprisoned. So that's a great win, and now the coalition is moving towards exploring and really dealing with the issue of sentencing reform. So as we listen to Stephen talk about that, I wish I could give you a little bit more background on Stephen, but we'll let him give it himself.
I'll do a little bit more too.
Yeah, okay. We should really be mindful of the criteria that we want to set, that we have set for ourselves really about how we're going forward with Reform Ohio, what initiatives are going to be important for the immediate future to lead us into our long-term sustainable future as an organizing movement. And we're looking to be involved with an issue that is winnable, has a broad coalition behind it, that speaks to our Jewish values and to us as people, and a coalition to which we could be a valuable partner. So if you have questions, we're asking if you sort of take your cursor down to the bottom, there's a little bubble that says chat underneath it. And if you have questions, we're asking you to put them there. Oh, somebody, Enid just said, hi, Enid, later here, sorry, okay. Does not have a microphone. So Enid's with us, and which means that Enid actually already knows how to chat, and the rest of us can learn how to, now Enid's just taught us how to put questions down in the chat box.
Great. I'm going to share my screen in a moment. Sissy, is there anything else you want to add here?
No.
Okay. So I will share.
I wanted to say my time frame.
Great work. Okay. I have about 60 seconds. So I am Joy Friedman. I think most folks know me. I am senior organizer at Just Congregations at the Union for Reform Judaism, and work very closely with the Religious Action Center. And I just want to contextualize that we're having this call because we have had several meetings throughout the last year that have demonstrated that the clergy across the state of Ohio, you all, want to take effective action as a collective across the state and in relationship with others. And we determined that the way we'll do that is by picking a campaign, a first campaign, and participating as part of a coalition and hopefully seeing it through to resolution, and then picking the next and the next. So when we met in December, we learned a little more about, as we've been learning in conversations across the state, about issues that have traction and coalitions behind them, from Karen Kessler, a reporter whose voice you all may be familiar with. And one of the issues she told us about was criminal justice reform. And we are now about to learn from one of the leaders of the criminal justice reform work in the state, both through the organization he works for and from what I can understand from a couple calls we've had together, who he himself is a key component of the successes, including the one around criminal justice reform that Sissy talked about, the ban the box piece. So I'm really excited to learn with Stephen. And for all of you, those of you who were with us in December know that we have a whole list of issues. But when I met with Stephen and then shared that with the Ohio core team, which includes Josh Caruso, Allison Van, John Adlin, Sissy Coran, Rick Kellner, and Misha Zinkow, they said, boy, it might make sense to actually circumvent that larger process and go with this criminal justice reform. If it's as good as Joy is making it sound. We would never do that without deciding that as a team. This is a Reform Ohio clergy effort. So the reason for this call is so that we can make an educated judgment about that. So without further ado, let's hear from Stephen Johnson Grove, who's the Deputy Director of the Ohio Justice and Policy Center. Stephen is an attorney and now a coalition partner who's effectively won statewide legislation on criminal justice reform. So Stephen, take it away.
Thank you. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for that introduction, Joy. So I am an attorney. We've been doing criminal justice reform in Ohio. My office, the Ohio Justice and Policy Center, is a law office and policy advocacy. So I do a lot of things in Columbus, work very closely with a lot of grassroots organizers from all across the state, many different cities. And I'm excited to be working with you all. And we'll be we have more to come. And I guess that's my job here today, is to lay that out. So I'm going to say a little bit about, I'm going to give you a story to give some context to this, like why this issue matters and what it could mean in our state. And then I'm going to then tell you more in detail about the coalition that I'm part of. I'll tell you a bit about the policies that we're actually thinking about doing, and then the coalition, and then connect that to why a unique Jewish voice would matter for that coalition. I think Elaine, if you could press mute on yours, and I think there's a couple others. If you haven't press mute now, down at the bottom of your toolbar. Okay, so a story. Story is a policy story and a very, very heartrending personal story. I'm going to use one from California because that connects to what we're going to do in Ohio. In 2005, a woman named Dion Wilson, earlier that year before, so she met her husband. She actually worked in a gun shop. Her husband was a police officer, and in 2005, he was shot and killed in a routine daytime traffic stop. There was a guy, she names him often. His name was Irving Ramirez. And Irving, it was his birthday. He'd been drinking all day, but also had an open warrant, and got pulled over for some traffic stop and decided that he didn't want to go back to jail. And so in the course of this routine traffic stop, the police officer turns away to fill out a paperwork, and Irving shoots him and kills him. Dion, a police officer's widow, played into the role, and I don't mean to make it sound trite, but you might imagine the response that a police officer's widow might have, which is she very eagerly sought the death penalty for Irving, and that she was successful in getting that through the prosecutor was. And she was furious. She was, eager to do even after that, wanted to be involved in advocating for the toughest of tough on crime. If somebody, I think she had a quote, she said, if somebody steals a popsicle, I want them to go away for life. And she was just sort of had this fury inside her that she realized was not satisfied after she got the death penalty. She says this now, and she wasn't satisfied, after years of this guy spending time in prison, wasn't satisfied when she got to speak and was given opportunities to speak, to seek harsher and harsher punishments in various political arenas. And so she stopped and kind of got some space and, sought a different spiritual path for herself. And over the course of the years, through her own spiritual path, she actually flipped dramatically and got involved slowly with a new crime survivors group that was just being built in California. It's called Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice, which was attached to something called Californians for Safety and Justice. And I encourage you to look that up after this call if you'd like. What that group was about was developing Californians for Safety and Justice built something called Prop 47. So if you guys, Joy knows a bit about that, and others who have any colleagues or friends in California, you might ask them about Prop 47. In some ways, Prop 47 was very elegant and simple. It took 6 felonies and made them misdemeanors, and it did it retroactively. What that means is if anybody in the future charged with those crimes would be charged at a misdemeanor level instead of a felony level, but also anybody who had one of those crimes from the past and was currently in prison, or even had it from decades ago and was just around in the community and had this on their record, they could retroactively go back and reclassify the offense down to a misdemeanor. That meant that like 10,000 people got out of California's severely overcrowded prisons. They have the largest prison system in the country. California does. It's like 200,000. It was almost, it was up to about 190. In fact, California was under a Supreme Court of the United States order to depopulate their prisons. So it was quite, it was an important piece. There had been some effort by state government voluntarily to depopulate the prisons, but they were half measures that were rather inadequate. This Prop 47 was an initiative of the citizens, so it was a ballot initiative statute. And the very unique thing, to bring it back to Dion's story, is that she, the widow of a murdered police officer, was the public face of this campaign. And what she said very powerfully was, tough on crime wouldn't have prevented my husband from being killed. Tough on crime made it more likely that my husband got killed. And that through, her voice, I could say that, but somebody of that position in life saying that obviously is dramatically different. It caught obviously a huge amount of attention, and there was an incredibly well-funded and complex campaign all around this issue and this Prop 47. But Dion's story was one of the key components of that. And the organizing of other crime survivors. She was, the symbolic, spokesperson, but there was a lot of organizing going on across California of crime survivors who, up until that point, the voice of crime survivors honestly had been almost owned or co-opted by 2 entities, the prosecutors of the state and the prison guards union. Every year or two, I forget, it was a 2-year thing, the prison guard union would convene its own crime survivors group in Sacramento that would at times end with a chant, build more prisons, build more prisons. That was the chant that ended the rally. So crime survivors coming out and saying, we actually need to send fewer people to prison or send them for shorter periods of time. We need to invest more in trauma recovery. We need to invest more in community resources to prevent crime in a really meaningful and evidence-based way. It's just completely sea change, like a narrative shift of cataclysmic proportions. And it really caught a lot of, political people off guard because there was sort of an assumed order of power. Prosecutors and the prison guards union was very powerful in the state legislature. They got what they wanted, which meant more prison sentences and meant more full prisons and meant more jobs for prison guards. But it had gotten over and beyond a crisis point in California. And so the prison guards union got pushed back, and there was this change in a dialogue about what safety means. What is public safety? So that is the start of something that we are in the midst of shifting, kind of bringing to Ohio and building up in Ohio. So let me tell you now about what's the opportunities here in Ohio. And it'll all connect as we go on here. The group I'm part of is called, I'm the Ohio Justice and Policy Center. I'm part of some larger umbrella groups. And what we're looking at is sentencing reform that would do something similar. Not necessarily would be cut and paste from California's example, but that we would do some kind of deep sentencing reform that would dramatically reduce the prison population and reinvest in services that treat the trauma that both led to the crime and resulted from the crime, because there's trauma all around. I mean, that's the new safety narrative that we're building up, is that that crime and the event that is categorized as a violation of the Ohio Revised Code, that one moment is the expression of a larger context of a lot of trauma on probably many sides. And that the way to address that trauma is not to cause more trauma, which is what prison is. There may be a need, and I'm the first to say that there are times when people do need to go to prison, and that's the way to protect the community and protect the individual victim, is to separate someone who's violent or scary or threatening from the community, in this case, prison. But there are many, many, many other scenarios, which not just me, but even our Ohio's prison director, Gary Moore, will say there are thousands of people in our prisons that don't need to be there, and that the trauma that they're expressing in prison that leads to chaos in prison ought to be better treated in the community. In fact, could have been preventatively treated so that none of this ever happened. There are a lot of people seeing that. So I'm working with a coalition to build a set of sentencing reforms that would do this, that would, again, like reduce prison population and shift resources to trauma recovery, health, and resources in communities that are over-prosecuted and over-policed. The coalition, a little bit about that coalition, and then how the Jewish community could potentially connect to that. The coalition is started before, there's currently a new thing called the Ohio Transformation Fund. And it's actually funding Greater Cleveland congregations. And I have a list here, folks, and I forget which of you, which congregation is it that is already part of that, Greater Cleveland congregations?
There's a number of, hi, this is Josh Caruso from Fairmount Temple. Fairmount Temple is one of the member congregations, as well as the Bourbon Temple, Temple Tifereth, Israel Temple. So we've got 4 Reformed congregations here in town who belong to GCC.
Great. That's phenomenal. So Kalila Worley, I don't know if you've met her, but she's the one I've interacted with most, at least recently, from GCC. She's one of their main organizers. So GCC is a part of being funded by this Ohio Transformation Fund, ACLU of Ohio, and then what I'm also part of is something called the Ohio Organizing Collaborative. There's umbrellas and umbrellas of umbrellas. Sorry, it's a little complicated. So I'll try to make this as clear as I can. OJPC, my office, is this little nonprofit. 12 of us here in Cincinnati. We work statewide, both litigation and policy work. We're just our own thing. One board, one executive director. There is then the Ohio Organizing Collaborative, which is a mixture of policy groups, labor, and grassroots organizers. That has been in existence for about 8 to 10 years, I think. And OJPC is a member of that. We're a policy partner. Most of the members are, like I said, labor and grassroots organizers. We were part of the leaders, really, of creating Senate Bill 337 in 2012, which was signed at a GCC church, I believe, by Governor Kasich. That was 2012. And as Joy indicated, our next big campaign was this Ban the Box movement, which we were the leaders of, created the law, got it pushed to the legislature, and that just got passed in December. The Ohio Transformation Fund was a new creation just this past year to better resource this growing network of aligned. And so they've funded others that are not like ACLU and GCC, who are not members of the Ohio Organizing Collaborative, but they're part of this coalition, which is now, so just to be clear, the coalition of advocates is still distinct from the funding entity. The entity that's funding it, Ohio Transformation Fund, the coalition is called the People's Justice Coalition. All right, so that People's Justice Coalition is right now the basis upon which we're going to try to drive this kind of sentencing reform, this new public safety narrative. So that's what I think is really exciting. We have a track record of success. Thus far, it's been in the realms of reentry. Senate Bill 337 in 2012 had to do with removing barriers for people with criminal records getting jobs. The Ban the Box thing that Joy indicated is a similar theme, removing barriers for people with criminal records trying to get public employment. the next big push is going to be on another scale of, shrinking the prison system in a way that's safe and responsible. And the strength of that campaign is the diversity, the different color skins, the different religious backgrounds, the different socioeconomic statuses. That's what I'm most excited about building. I think we can build, because the public safety narrative hits everybody. I was at an amazing event at Jewish Family Service here in Cincinnati in December, where there was a presentation by a lawyer from, he was from California, but he was talking about his work on behalf of a woman who's an inmate in California. It's a great documentary, Crime After Crime. Highly recommend it. Orthodox rabbi, crazy story, but it's amazing documentary. But like the voice of faith and of the Torah and how that connects to the search for justice and repairing the world was an amazing connection with hip hop artists and urban community organizers and others, like bringing this unified voice saying, we want safety to look different. The way prosecutors and, well, in California, the Prison Guards Union talked about safety is not our safety. As I talked to Joy another time, in some previous iterations of criminal justice dialogue, if you've ever paid attention to this issue before in reading or personal conversations, there's a lot of talk about the racial injustice, which is enormous and real. This is why the Black Lives Matter movement exists. And if the dialogue gets set up explicitly or implicitly as fairness versus safety, we need to be more racially fair. But the prosecutors and people that are of the tough on crime ilk are saying, well, over here is safety, and it's safety versus fairness. Fairness always loses, always. Some either deep within our own honest hearts it loses when we think about our own children, or it loses in the public sphere at least. But if you have a campaign on shrinking the prison system that says, no, we actually want more safety, we want better safety, we want real safety, then we're talking about safety versus safety. And it's the safety of tough on crime that we're actually eventually revealing as a ruse, as no longer the real kind of safety that we want. So that's what I'm here to invite you all to think about participating in, is joining this kind of coalition of reclaiming what safety means and doing that interwoven with a deep sense of racial justice and socioeconomic justice. I think there's just an incredible potential. And I just love that there would be this incredibly unique voice of Reform rabbis. I just think that would add a lot to our coalition that isn't quite there yet. We have a decent evangelical voice building within the coalition, but we don't have a strong Jewish voice, and it would be invaluable. It really would. So any questions?
At this point, if you want to ask a question, you will please remember to unmute yourself. And I'm actually going to remind folks as you start to ask questions to think about the criteria. You don't have to ask questions based on this criteria, but just to have them. I'm going to share my screen so you can see them. And I'm a visual learner, so in case this helps for you too. Okay, now go for it. Questions, please share them.
This is Rob Nosenchuk from Fairmount Temple. My question is, you mentioned a decent evangelical coalition forming. Are there any of those partners here in Northeast Ohio? This would be helpful for us to potentially reach out to such partners about just growing our relationship in general, or other interfaith events, rather than strictly going to build a coalition only around this one issue.
Yeah, the evangelical, I couldn't, GCC is the natural thing because it already is a coalition of both, of all these different faiths. In Akron, I don't know the names of the congregations, and I can get those certainly to Joy or to you. But that's where there's been several churches that have been very much engaged in this organizing effort, and Youngstown. So that's my quick answer to that question.
Stephen, can you tell us a little more about what it is that you're that we're hoping to win what changes would be, and how we achieve that win?
Yeah. So the changes we're seeking are probably a sentencing reduction along the lines of, not unlike what was done in California, picking a few offenses, probably low-level nonviolent offenses. I'll tell you just a quick synopsis. Like the current prison population, if you think about what the data says, is our prison population in Ohio. About 45% of our prison population are the extreme end of long-term sentences. They're either death sentences, life without parole, life with the possibility of parole, or at least a 20-year sentence or more. So these are like the block of sentences that aren't going anywhere anytime soon. They're stuck. They're big, long sentences. Probably not going to reduce those anytime soon. Another 45% of prison sentences in Ohio are 8 months or less. So there's this huge spinning hamster wheel of people that can't ever complete any programming. By the time they get processed and moved around from one institution to the next, they're out. So there's a ample opportunity at that lower end. The fifth degree felonies in Ohio are the lowest degree, fifth degree, and then maybe fourth degree, the next one up. Nonviolent offenses that really don't need to be there. And there's ample opportunity to get them out and to never send them to prison and have lower level, more effective programming. Honestly, prison makes people in that scenario more likely to offend. If you send someone with these low-level nonviolent offenses to prison, you make it more likely that they're going to reoffend. So we have great arguments and evidence for getting them out. What those specific offenses are, I don't have that right yet. I'm working on that actually right now with the ACLU of Ohio. The campaign would be a diverse campaign of a lot of public media work, public events, education in the community, lobbying in Columbus, public advocacy in Columbus and rallies, writing op-eds, and the other thing that's always possible is just, a financial contribution. Like we have this whole fund, the Ohio Transformation Fund is a funding entity, which can be resourced if that was something that, you or people you knew of or entities you knew of could join the Ohio Transformation Fund. There could be a participation that way by being a funding partner.
Hi, we have a question here at Fairmount Temple.
Hi, it's Sarah Sager, cantor at Fairmount Temple. I'm wondering if there's any data or statistics about maybe from California or another state that has gone through this process, and not just the increased safety, but what is saved by what are the finances that are saved? What is the people power that is saved or used? What are the benefits? What are the advantages to this? Because I'm hearing my congregants, we're living in an age of great fear. Mm-hmm. And unless we can assuage that fear with the proper language and the proper identification of what population we're talking about and how that's going to ultimately benefit them, I think we're blowing into the wind.
Sure. I will say the wind is starting to blow our way, or my way anyway. And I'm inviting you to come along and fly your kite.
Listen, I heard Bernie Sanders last night, and he's, but yeah.
So there are several arguments in favor of smart on crime reform. And as I said, the specifics of the policy, I'm not offering you that. You're getting in on the ground floor, 1995. But wait, there's more. The full policy is not nailed down yet. And so it's not like I can lay out for you specifically, like this offense is going to be recategorized from felony to misdemeanor, and therefore this number of people won't be prosecuted in prison, and therefore here are the dollars that flow from it. However, I promise you there will be a clear fiscal argument. There was with all the campaigns we've worked on so far, and there will be with this one, a fiscal conservative argument. But it's also this humane argument. I think what Californians showed and what I'm most interested in is where someone like Dion Wilson gets to share her story of this is what means safety to me, and I want my family to be safer. And Tough on Crime has sold us a bill of goods. We thought that meant safety, and it's actually not giving it to us. So that's what we'll be building, is both a data-driven, this X number of fewer people in prison, and instead putting them in jobs programs or mental health programs or what have you, and saving dollars that way, but humane stories. It will always be about those humane stories that I think ultimately hook the hearts and minds of your congregations and the voters of Ohio.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, there are other questions.
I have a question from Cloud Library. But first, Sissy, I guess.
No, I'm curious about the sort of the law and legal enforcement end of the coalition, and specifically since Michelle Alexander is in Ohio and wrote the new Jim Crow, is she involved in this effort, or anyone like her?
Yeah, so not quite yet. We've certainly had lots of conversations with her, and it's not like a formal sign-on yet. We really haven't. I will tell you, this coalition is meeting this Thursday to just like sign its charter. I mean, we've just like formed, and we did like rules of engagement and amongst ourselves, and like how do we add new groups? Like, let's say Reformed Jewish Rabbis of Ohio wanted to sign up. Okay, what does that look like? How do we add them? We're just like finalizing that this Thursday. So no, we have not formally invited Piper Kerman, for example, or Michelle Alexander. We've talked to them a lot. I have a good conversation, have had more than one conversation with Piper, and she did an event for us this past fall. But I think it's highly likely that we'll be able to engage those folks. We just haven't yet. Formally.
Other question?
I have a question.
Oh, okay, please.
Hi. I was wondering if you have is there any impact of this campaign about the death sentence? Any relationships in the other campaigns or so?
Yeah, that is. I will say the People's Justice Coalition has not decided specifically to take on the death penalty. However, that I'm a key partner in that as well. That's sort of another campaign that's going on right now. There's a bill pending in the Senate that would limit or eliminate the death penalty, at least for the seriously mentally ill. And we are a key partner in that coalition. The coalition is led by the Ohioans to Stop Executions, but we are working with them on that. As some of you who care about the death penalty may know, there was a whole Supreme Court task force and a whole raft of recommendations to reform the death penalty in Ohio. And some of those have made their percolated up into legislation. There's some that are still on deck and have not. So there could be more work around that. I'm not sure it will fold directly into the People's Justice Coalition, but if you personally or if your group are interested in death penalty work, I can totally connect you to exactly who's moving on that.
Great. Are there any other questions of our chevre, of our group, of Mr. Johnson? Okay. Joy, should we move to the closing piece, or is there anything you would like to add?
I don't think, I guess I've been taking some notes and will be sure to share some of the links and information that Stephen shared with us too, so that folks who want to do some more thinking, who need a little more time for it to percolate, can do so and can share any questions that come up in the after sifting through that and letting this percolate.
Could I say one more thing I forgot to include in sort of the background context? If I just have 1 minute. The thing that's moving rather quickly right now, so the idea of what this specific policy reform will be is moving quickly because there is something going on right now in the Ohio legislature. It's called the Recodification Committee. So the Ohio legislature, of its own initiative, created something last year to a committee that includes a few legislators, but several outside people, including my executive director, to rewrite the entire Ohio Criminal Code. A rather daunting task, and it's tedious, to say the least. But within the context of that recodification committee, there is, of course, the opportunity to make some changes that are not just technical or grammar fixes, but in fact, the deeper kinds of sentencing reforms I've been talking about. So that is going. That committee was formed last year and is required to deliver its recommendations to the legislature in August. And what that means, backing that up, is that they'll be finalizing a draft by April or May. There may be a public comment period in May. But since my executive director is on the committee, we have the opportunity right now to shape that. So we are working rather as fast as we can to fold in some of these deeper ideas even into that recodification committee. However, if the recodification committee, because of its leadership or its charter or politics, decides it wants to play it safe and doesn't go with what we recommend, we have plans for the next steps, which may mean taking it straight to the voters like they did in California, could mean other things. So I just want to let you know that like this is moving fast, it's moving right now, and there's multiple stages to the campaign. Some of it may be very technical, wonky inside something that has multiple syllables, a recodification committee. And then there may be stuff that's more assertive public events as the campaign progresses.
Great. And I would say that we really have the opportunity now to consider if this is an issue that speaks to us, speaks to our communities, speaks to our sensibilities as Reformed Jews, and there's a big compelling argument to take on sentencing reform, and it does hit some of our criteria, but the next step will be for our individual communities to be able to talk together and meet as a chevre. Allison Van and I and John have communicated, so there will be a Cleveland date that will get out today to you for Cleveland folk to meet, and I believe the Columbus and Cincinnati Reformed clergy have already settled on dates. So we're looking forward to getting together and talk about that. I know Misha was going to close us out, correct?
That's my understanding, yeah. So, Stephen, thank you very much for your time and for parsing this out for us. And thanks to everybody for being on the call and listening in. So, just to reiterate process and remind everyone that we jumped on this opportunity to speak with Stephen, as we can hear things are moving quickly on this issue. We don't want to circumvent our process entirely, so and Josh had just hinted about the community meetings that we'll need to have, because we have a decision to make, and that's needs to be made soon. So the three communities will caucus, and then Joy, I believe we have a date to, like a deadline for that, a due date for that.
We made an agreement among the core team to do that before CCAR, and we'll get folks together post CCAR in early March. Sissy sent out a doodle, so if you haven't filled that out, please do, so that we can set up a time in early March to figure out what plans will be moving forward.
So the conversation should happen before February 19th. And then we'll get back together after the conference in Jerusalem to make a decision, and whether we choose to, if we choose to join this coalition on criminal justice sentencing reform. Just to remind everyone, it doesn't mean that we wouldn't take on other issues down the road, but remember that we are seeking to coalesce sooner than later as a group, so that, we can maybe reach some lower hanging fruit and not get ourselves involved in a long quagmire for our very first challenge, our very first issue that we want to take on. So if we feel, you'll have to refer back to the criteria that we had set out in terms of winnability and so forth, and fitting and aligning with our values as to whether or not we want to bump a bit, sort of fast track this issue. So you'll sit down and talk about how you feel about it, and whether or not this opportunity is compelling enough to quickly rise and put the others on hold until we win this, and then move on to another issue, perhaps with another kind of coalition. So, and the things to think about would be, does this issue speak to you as a rabbi, as a Jew? Does it align with your values? Does it feel exciting to coalesce around that as a chevra? Because remember, our purpose is also to form a sense of greater connectedness amongst ourselves in terms of our relationships. And is it something that you can explain in an elevator speech to congregants? And can we excite them to support us in this endeavor? So those are the kinds of questions that you should talk about when you get together face-to-face in Cincinnati, here in Columbus, and in Cleveland. And with the last minute or so that I have before Joy, you know, if you have any last-minute things to close the call with, it's just perhaps a stroke of a divine pen that we're opening Parshat Mishpatim this week, which really deals with, among other things, equitable and fair sentencing for different kinds of crimes, and really places a systemic check on I think, on the abuse of power. And it does that both in dealing with criminal acts and moral and ethical acts, and it also deals with it opens with how we treat slaves, and Jeremiah, who preaches the Haftarah this week, talks about having that the Judeans had reneged on their covenant agreement to release, to declare a dror, a freedom, a release of their slaves after 6 years, and had completely ignored the covenant. And that was the sort of one of the focal points of Jeremiah, condemning Judah and predicting that Jerusalem would be destroyed after Micha had predicted that just before him. So this is certainly something for us to think about in terms of standing on very broad shoulders as we consider doing justice. Joy?
Yasher Koach. Thank you, Rabbi Zinkel, for that. And what a reminder that there is something particularly powerful about working as clergy rooted in a text that calls us to justice. And I guess my last thought is just a big thank you to Stephen Johnson Grove for your preparation for this, your thoughtfulness, the work you do for justice.
You're welcome.
May everyone have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.